And right now, I am pleased to introduce and get started with the panel, which is a great panel today. One of the many reasons I love it is that we have 3 different representatives at different places kind of in the carbon market to be able to tell us about their experiences. So these are the ones who are on the ground doing the work. So with that, the first I'm pleased to introduce, born and raised in Madagascar, is Dr. Lalao Aigrette, a seasoned marine biologist and blue carbon project manager at Bôndy International. With over a decade and a half of experience, she's been working closely with local coastal communities, promoting and advocating for nature and human rights-based solutions to preserve and restore mangrove forests, a vital but threatened ecosystem. One of her notable achievements is the successful establishment and registration of the first mangrove carbon sequestration project in her home country of Madagascar. Thank you for joining us. The next panelist I'd like to introduce is Mathilde Mignot. She is leading Nature and Tech-Based Solutions Business Unit for EcoAct and has been working on the voluntary carbon market for almost a decade. She is also a member of the Accreditation Committee of ICORA, the International Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance, working alongside the other key organizations to set the best practices on the market and drive quality. Thank you, Mathilde. Welcome. And last but not least, Pascal Asselin is co-founder of MORFO, and project developer working to restore forest ecosystems in French Guiana and Brazil. MORFO brings together science with local communities and local knowledge to identify restoration opportunities and aim to bring them to scale. Welcome, Pascal. Thank you. So I'd like to join the panel. And I think to start, we've started talking and framing this whole conversation around the challenges with carbon credits. So as someone working on the ground, doing the actual implementation and development, someone working as a developer, being that connection between communities and the projects, and Mathilde really connecting the projects to corporate buyers, each playing a different role in that market. But quite curious, from your perspective and your role, what is the greatest challenge that you've experienced in the market? Maybe we can start with you, Lalao.
Sure. Okay, many challenge, but the time will not allow me to state all of the challenges. But I will start with the policy barrier, which is over the control of the project developer or the community or all of stakeholders involved except the policymakers, which is not allowing investors to invest. So there is a need to have good policy in place to channel climate finance. And in addition to that, as Maggie mentioned earlier, the complexity of the standard, not only the standard, but also the ecosystem. If we are talking about the mangrove, it is really, really complex. When you are restoring mangrove, you have to consider many features to ensure that your mangrove is properly restored. And community can't wait for 10 years from the first introduction of a project until the validation of a project. So there is a need to make sure community are engaged from the early stage of the project, and it is also important to provide information uptight to the community to maintain the trust between the project developers and the community who are key player of the success of the carbon project. That is all from my experience from the ground.
Thank you for that. Does anything there feel familiar for you? It strikes me you're also working with local communities. What are the sort of challenges that you see?
Sure. I think we have 3 main challenges on our parts. To name them, there's like credibility. The second one would be investments. And the last one would be the pace. The first one, credibility, would be like how, and I think that we'll discuss that just after, but how much can we or how much, how can we make sure that carbon credits have this credibility to make sure that investors can invest, not blinded, but they can trust in the carbon credits they are paying for. Even if they can be sequestered over like 30 years if we talk about forest or even some part of mangroves. So the first one would be this credibility. The second one would be the investors, to make sure that even if the system of carbon credits is not mature yet, we need to make sure that we invest heavily to make it work. Of course, there are many flaws, and of course, we'll discuss that maybe. It has flaws, but we don't have to stop the system. We have to invest massively to make sure that it will work. And the last one, of course, is the pace of certification, to make sure that carbon project developer can actually make this project grow and make this project happen. And thanks to investments, and not because of investment that are not happening, there are no projects. So pace would be the last one.
Thank you for that. And how about Mathilde? How about from your perspective? What are some of the challenges? Strikes me you've been quite close to some of those most under fire.
Thank you, Erin. And I think some of the challenges that have been said by Lalao and by Pascal are very true for us as project developers as well. Everything linked to working with the standards and working with the communities and trying to make this possible on the ground with all of the expectations from the end buyer as well. What I want to focus here on my side is more linked to the let's say, go back to the companies and the corporate side and think about their challenges when we think about carbon credits. And what I've seen in my experience as a very French person and being in Paris here to have this debate is perfect, I would say, because one of the main challenges that we see on the carbon credits and globally on the offsetting schemes is this debate between reduction versus offsetting, saying like we need to create something where there is one or the other. And I feel this is a very big shame and a challenge for us as project developers, as communities, as people from the ground, where we need to channel funds toward those projects, when we see all of those debates, I would say, in the Western world, and especially in France, saying like, first you need to reduce and then you need to offset. Obviously, you need to reduce first as much as you can and tackle those residual emissions that you will take time to transition. Because when we talk about 2050, we're not going to wait until 2050 that everybody has reduced to zero. In the best of the world, or like to 90% decrease, to start thinking about our ecosystem, our nature base, and everything that will be not here by then, I think. So it's really a big challenge, and where we're trying to work at EcoAct and convey as an idea is really you need to think as a corporate inside your value chain, obviously, and do as much as you can inside your value chain, but also take into account one of the most important words in this whole debate is the crisis, the urgency, the fact that we are losing our ecosystem. And I'm not a scientist, but you all know all of the data around this and the past, like how fast everything is, like how fast we are losing our ecosystems. And this is where we need to say, let's just not address those emissions that we can't reduce. Let's address them with credible solution. And carbon offsetting has been very much challenged. Why? Due to that same point that I was saying, reduction. Carbon credits have been criticized and challenged because they are linked to the impact of the organization. And if an organization is saying, oh, I'm investing in those projects through carbon credits, so through the carbon finance mechanism, mainly we hear that word a lot, greenwashing. And the thing is that if they would do the same, invest in the same project, for example, in Madagascar, but through corporate philanthropy, we won't hear that much greenwashing. So it's really because it's linked to their impact that we start to raise and hearing that like word saying you're not doing it right. So of course, it's being said, it's a challenge. It's not easy to work in these countries, to work in very complicated areas on nature and things that we don't master that much and that we are trying to support and to keep alive. But definitely, my point would be like, let's not create a debate on preventing action outside of the value chain of organization, because we know that the ones that are most involved in offsetting are the ones that are most advanced toward their net zero journey. So that's what I see as one of the most challenged today, to bring those funds on the ground.
Thank you for that. And thanks for grappling with, and I think bringing up lots of the challenges and some of the drawbacks. But I wonder if maybe we might spin this on its head a little bit and look at not just what are some of the challenges with carbon credits, but maybe also what are some of the things they enable. You know, why do we need them as a mechanism, and what's important about them? So maybe Pascal, you could start us off.
The great thing, and maybe the amazing thing about carbon credit, is that they can pre-finance projects. So it can make things happen. And so for us, like as project developers, and so we are doing forest restoration, if there's no money, there's no project. So this system of carbon credits can make things happen. And of course, it requires to make things right, meaning, and I will talk about this later as well, but meaning biodiversity, restoring biodiversity, not doing monospecies projects, meaning uplifting local communities. But if you are aligning all these planets, then carbon credits can allow you to make great projects. And even more, that we saw appearing some complements to like the gold standards or the Vera standards to give a value, like a prime value on high quality project. They call it high integrity, meaning that they integrate all these components in the project. It's not only about carbon. It's about how can you subsequently and on the long term capture or sequester carbon and make sure they last, and they just don't last on the carbon side, but on the populations, on the social aspect, and on the biodiversity aspects. That would be it.
Thank you. So Lalao, you spoke a lot about communities and the importance of bringing communities in from the outset. I guess, you know, for you, what is the kind of power and what are the benefits of particularly nature-based carbon credits? And, you know, what can these accomplish maybe in addition to or besides just the carbon?
Okay. I think everyone in this room agree with me that the emission reduction is only one piece of the puzzle. There are lots of benefits from the protection and restoration of the ecosystem. And the carbon credit is a powerful instrument toward the sustainable development, at least contributing to reach and achieve 10 of SDGs. If I did some study about the impact and the perception of the community on the carbon project. And from the community perspective, the emission reduction is the least tangible benefits from the perspective of the community. They are caring about their livelihoods. They don't care about the emission reduction. So it is really, really important that to ensure that the carbon credit reach its full potential, it needs to adopt integrated approach. Looking for the mangrove as an example, it is important to adopt integrated approach, looking at the fisheries management and the forest management to ensure that the livelihoods of the community are improved. Because if the mangrove are restored, their functionality to provide different goods and systems are improved also. And as we know, carbon ecosystems are traditionally common pool resources. So carbon project, if it's done properly, it can contribute to the social impact, like community cohesion, because community and villages need to sit down together to make common decision on the rule, local rule to manage the mangrove. So the carbon credit can go far beyond the emission reduction if it is done properly. So we should not focus only on that, but we should consider the other benefits of the carbon credit. Yes.
Thank you. How about from your perspective, Mathilde? I mean, you're sitting there talking with buyers. Are they, is this also a mechanism they see as important? And why do we need this sort of mechanism?
Yes, and it's sort of like completing what you're saying, Lalao, on very going back to sort of like a project in Madagascar in restoring mangrove to the global need to restore mangroves and ecosystem at global level. What I want to say is, why do we need carbon credits? Because we need to invest in those solutions. We need tools. We need to meet the Paris Agreement. And going back to what I was saying before, is that in the Paris Agreement, they say, basically it said we need to develop the carbon sink. We need to develop the carbon sink, and we can't do it without the private sector. And going back to this, we need a tool that makes sense for the private sector. So addressing their net zero journey and following the SBTi guidance, they see the importance of this mechanism of carbon offsetting linked to their impact and what are they doing to meet the global net zero economy by 2050. So this is this kind of tools that we need to push the investment at global level. And let's also think about something, is that we're in France, and I'm not talking about France, but it's a global topic, obviously, but French corporates, for example, it's a great country with great industries that are not only acting in France. So we have projects in France that we are proud of and that are being developed under other mechanisms, and one of them actually being the French label bas carbone, what we call the domestic scheme. But those same companies, when we think about them, have an impact at global level. And those those countries where they have an impact, they have a responsibility. So global impact means global responsibilities, and this is why we need those tools. And maybe to finish on this, we talk a lot about this tool. Is it the right one? Is it working? How to improve it? Obviously, as you said, Lalao, if done well, obviously we need to put in place the best practice. Obviously, we're not let's develop not good project, of course. But the real question is how much do we need to tackle the climate crisis? And it's actually $8.1 trillion that are needed by 2050, sorry. So we're not there yet, far, far, far away from there. So instead of just being putting all of the scrutiny on everything linked to one tool, let's enhance it, let's push the best practice, let's do as much as possible, but let's maybe also develop other tools. So there is a lot of things that we need to do, and it's all about obviously improvement and best practice, but on top of it, there is a lot of money that is needed, so let's continue using the tools that we have.
Just to complement on this, from these great figures, a recent study from the UNEP showed that private finance invests 140 times more in projects harming the nature than in nature-positive projects. So this shows the great gap that we have to fill. So it's, yes, we need to invest more in nature-positive projects, but as well reduce in projects harming the nature.
So this brings me, I think, to the next question, which is really that, one of the complicated factors about this is, I think lots of the benefits you've spoken about really have little to do with carbon. Well, I guess carbon, of course, helps us draw down to net zero. That's the point. But there are lots of other benefits you've all spoken about. And so, how can we drive for high quality and overcome some of these criticisms when we're really just selling carbon, but really trying to yield lots of these other benefits? Anyone want to volunteer to start?
Sure. Yeah. Based on the criticism, I don't know, maybe you are aware that last year, the principle to produce high quality of blue carbon has been documented and published. One of that is one of the key principles is community empowerment, and which is the key. Everyone talk, maybe project developer say that they empower community, but how? How do we say that community are empowered? And based on our experiences from Madagascar, our first approach is to secure community rights over mangrove management and to access their right, because the community are the guardian of the ecosystem. And how do they engage if their right over mangrove and to access to the resources are secured? They will not do it, because mangrove is open access. If they don't have a right to manage it, to use it, they will never engage on it. So the key principle is community empowerment. And the second one is it is really important to operate locally and contextually, because maybe the context in France is not same in Madagascar, and it is really, really important to consider local context, not only on the social aspect, but on the ecological aspect. There are lots of guidelines that were mostly developed from global north, I would say, and not really considering the expertise from the global south. However, the mangrove there maybe is different to the mangrove in the south. So why we apply that methodology? Yes, it is possible to use default value, but to allow you having high quality of carbon credit, you need to use data collected from the ground. And yeah.
All right, thank you. Pascal, how does MORFO deal with this?
Yeah, I cannot agree more with what you just said. Thank you.
Sure.
What we say, and I'll give precise examples, but we have like these 2+1 pillars for every project that we do, meaning that we restore biodiversity, we uplift local communities, and then we have a significant carbon sequestration. But if we just miss one of the first two pillars, then the project won't last and they won't have any effect. So to give precise examples, the first idea about biodiversity for us, it's quite easy. It's to say, okay, we'll restore native species, but with biodiversity, meaning we just won't plant trees, but we'll plant herbaceous, bushes, small trees, big trees, 10 to 30 different species on the first steps of the project. This is biodiversity. And once we've planted, we just leave it like that. We make sure that we monitor the project with drone imagery, meaning centimeter resolution, to make sure that we understand what's happening on the ground, on the field. Meaning like what is growing, how much is growing, how big it is growing. And thanks to that, we can understand how much carbon has been sequestered by this forest. The second thing about the social aspects, when you talk about forest, 1.6 billion people are depending on the forest to live. So wherever you go and wherever you see a forest, you know that there will be people depending on this forest. So it means that you have to make sure that the people are involved in the projects, otherwise, it won't last. So the first thing is we have to collect seeds. We have to collect native seeds, native species. So you don't have any supermarket to do that. And so you have to go for these seeds. So go on the forest and make sure you can have this. So it means that we need to collaborate with local communities who know the forest, who know where to get these species, and then to build multi-year, but it's over like decades that we want to work with them and collaborate to make sure that we will be able to restore forests in 30 years and in 50 years and in 100 years with native species. The second part is that all these communities know some project, know how to do. And so even if we apply like advanced method like seed pods and disseminating with drones, we always keep between 10 to 20% to like these local communities to make sure that we work with them and we can inspire our methods, but from their way of doing things. And on the monitoring part, it's the same. We have like people from these communities working on the project to understand them. And so that's the way we do to imply and to have these two pillars that will lead to carbon sequestration.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, time is ticking down, so I am going to give the panel one last question and ask if you can try to grapple with it in about 20 to 30 seconds each. And so it strikes me, we have this great audience here with lots of different people, and you're each sitting in a different place in the voluntary carbon market. What is it that you need from other actors, companies, governments, policymakers, whomever? What do you need in order to be successful? What do you wish that the people here today take away and take with them today? Mathilde, let's start with you.
Thank you. I would say that as a sort of like conclusion and as a need, I think we are all, lots of people, as Margaret asked at the beginning, there is a lot of people working on the carbon market, and I think a lot of us as being working on the field and with communities, etc., we know like the importance of this. The importance for us now is not just us saying it. We need more advocacy, and I would love to hear I don't know, like the French government with their label by carbon to take a stand for those and to enhance carbon credits as a tool to reach the net zero economy. I will need like IPCC to take a stand. Basically, we need more advocacy from, for example, we hear, I mentioned about like greenwashing, but we hear more and more about green hushing. This is nice, but this is not helpful because we need to take a stand and stop like being shy about what it is, saying, oh my God, I didn't do all of my reduction. Let's accept that it takes time to reduce, and let's also accept that we are facing a climate crisis and that we need to tackle both at the same time. And let's say it out loud.
Great, thank you. All right, Pascal, 20 seconds. How can you wrap that up?
9 here, 10, okay. So for me, like one important thing, even more talking about forests, is just opening our mind on what is a forest. What is a forest for us, like from France, but from, let's say, local communities in Brazil, but in French Guiana, in Gabon, in like everywhere in the world, and to understand that we don't have the same perception, but we all have the same objective today to make nature positive project, to restore ecosystem, and to have like great human conditions in 100 years to make sure that we can still live here. So that would be like opening our minds. And Yann Arthus Bertrand made amazing pictures of forests around the world. It can help you like understand how it is perceived.
Thank you. And Lalao, would like to come to you for the last word.
Okay, I think the goal is similar to have a benefits for people, nature, and climate. And to reach that, together we can make a change that include investor to invest on the projects, policymaker to implement good policy, adequate, developed in transparency and equity manner, and also involve the community and as well as the scientific, because everyone has a role to ensure that we reach our expected impact.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. I would like to give a big hand to our panel. Thank you very much for sharing so many different perspectives with us today. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, that's so great. Good. And